The Singapore Tourism Board has laid out plans to revive the industry that's suffering due to the impact of COVID-19. A record $45 million has been allocated to get locals to rediscover Singapore. But what does that money buy? And how do you make the familiar exciting? Well, joining us with more is Keith Tan. He's the Chief Executive of the Singapore Tourism Board. Good evening, Keith. Welcome, Mr. Tan. Now, how will the Tourism Board's campaign encourage locals to visit places that they already know?
Well, first of all, I think we must recognize that even if we are familiar with a place, sometimes there will be nooks and crannies that we don't really know. So, for example, did you know that we have 4 nature reserves in Singapore and over 300 public parks? Did you know that we can rent a kayak and go kayaking at Marina Bay or at MacRitchie Reservoir? So there are many aspects about our country that may seem familiar to us, but sometimes being too familiar, then as a result, we tend to ignore or gloss over other parts of the country that we take for granted. So we hope to be able to encourage Singaporeans, locals, to go out and explore these hidden and less well-known nooks and crannies of our country.
Mr. Tan, $45 million is not a small amount. This is the largest amount ever devoted to domestic tourism. Is it necessary to contribute such a big amount?
Well, we've learned from our previous domestic tourism campaigns, which we did after SARS and after the global financial crisis 10 years ago, that there is value in having a national campaign that unifies and brings together different aspects of the tourism sector to come together in partnership with each other, rather than competing with each other, but coming together in partnership to offer great deals, attractions, packages, experiences to locals. And so a large part of our money is being spent trying to catalyze these offers and packages, and then to make these deals and packages discoverable by locals. So that's the intention.
Mr. Tan, on the topic of what the money is being used for, why is the money being used for marketing specifically, instead of perhaps being used to subsidize the entrance fees of tourist spots?
Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, Singaporeans may think that they are very familiar with the island, and then therefore think that everything is boring and it's all the same, right? So therefore, a large part of our effort is meant to challenge that assumption of familiarity. And so we need to come up with creative marketing campaigns, not just by ourselves, but together with the tourism stakeholders through our marketing partnerships program to tell new angles and to defamiliarize Singaporeans. So we need smart and effective marketing efforts to reach out to Singaporeans. And this is not just done by us, but by our tourism stakeholder partners in the industry as well, so that they are also then being challenged to think creatively about how they can present themselves, for now, to a local market, but eventually how they can present themselves creatively to an international market when we begin recovering internationally.
So how bad can we expect the unemployment situation in the tourism sector to be? What more can be done? Because after all, we just reported that Resorts World Sentosa laid off about 2,000 staff there.
Well, we don't expect international travel to resume anytime soon. Last year was a record year for us in Singapore tourism, and the tourism sector has sized itself accordingly, right? So naturally, we must expect some retrenchments since the international demand will not resume quickly. That being said, the Singapore Tourism Board and many other partner agencies in government are working very hard to work with any tourism company that thinks that they may have to retrench, and we are prepared to move quickly to help them, to help their workers, how we can facilitate their redeployment to other sectors of the economy.
Let's talk a little bit about the situation for the integrated resorts, Mr. Tan, because we're wondering whether there are any support measures planned for the integrated resorts since they committed money for expansion last year.
Well, the integrated resorts, both of them have done very well in the 10 years that they have been operating here in Singapore. And they have contributed very significantly to the tourism landscape in Singapore, and they are major players. We all recognize them as game changers in our tourism landscape. And we are grateful. We're happy for the way that they have upped the game for us here in Singapore. They are benefiting from the domestic recovery campaign and staycations already, and we are working with them to see how they can expand their appeal and also gradually be able to open up to more locals staying in their hotels, visiting their attractions as well.
Oh, thank you so much for speaking to us. Looking forward to the tourism campaign. We've been speaking there with Keith Tan, from the Chief Executive of the Singapore Tourism Board.